Hey everyone, we are live, pal. It's going to be a great show today with myself and Andrew Zarian. We have a special guest, someone who's creating all kinds of content these days with the Extreme Life of Matt Hardy podcast, as well as the Wives of Wrestling with Kim and Giovanna. Jon Alba, what is going on?
I am so grateful to be on with you guys today, and it's been a long time coming, and I appreciate it. Big fan of both of yours, and I'm excited to talk about smorgasbord of pro wrestling content, I guess. So,
Yes.
Andrew Zari and I have got this like New York centric area,
That's it.
facial hair, good hair kind of thing going on here, and I don't know.
You got to
I'm just a
explain
little
that one,
tanner than
Andrew.
you right now. I'm a
Yeah,
little tanner than you. I cheated. I went the beach bum the other day, and I
what
needed some
did you?
colors, so I did. Yeah, I did a fake and bake. So
Mm,
it's funny because I forgot what show I was at, and this is such a it kind of falls into the joke. I'm at a show, and this dude came over, tapped me on my shoulder, and you know what it was? It was the one here at in Queens at Grand
mm,
Slam, AW Grand Slam
yes.
at Arthur Ashe. Guy taps on my shoulder, and I turn around. And he goes, "Oh crap, Andrew Zarian! I thought you were Jon Alba because I was wearing my jacket." And I'm like, "Oh man!" I'm like, "That's funny." Because he's like, "No, no, no, I'm not making a joke. I really thought you were John." I was like, "That's hysterical."
Yeah, I've gotten mixed up for you before, and Chris Van Vliet all the time,
I
all
was
the
going to
time.
ask
I
about
see
Van
that. I
Vliet.
can see that.
Mhm. Yeah, but Chris is way more of a hunk than I am, so it's it's weird because we've been at the same show together, and he's like, Chris is a tall guy. A lot of people don't realize that. Like Chris is a tall man, and I'm like 5'10" on a good day, depending on what my hair looks like. And we were
Same.
together, and it was like I'll call him Mini Me, and it was somewhat terrifying.
Yeah, Van Vliet is also putting up weight with the Ass Boys, so it's a little bit of a
Yes.
different thing. He's pretty big dude. Okay, so while we have you on, we are going to talk about WrestleMania, of course, that's what everyone's talking about this week. But because we have the opportunity to talk to Jon, I'm interested in a lot of the things that Jon's doing, especially the podcast. So, talk a little bit before we even get into anything. I want to hear the story behind the Matt Hardy podcast and the story behind the Wives of Wrestling podcast that you're doing.
Yeah, so I'll start with Matt, I guess. Matt was my guy growing up. Like I loved watching Matt. I love the Hardy Boys, but for whatever reason, whereas Jeff resonated, I think, with most people more, Matt resonated with me more. I always thought he was such a great in-ring storyteller. We always use the steak and sizzle comparison. Like I was much more interested with the steak than the sizzle in this case. And when I'd say probably around 2018 or so, I got the idea in my head, like listening to Conrad's podcasts. I've been listening to them since he kind of started doing his thing. Like, who would be a great person to have a biographical podcast that could offer stuff that maybe some of the others aren't? And Matt Hardy instantly popped into my head. Then, about a year and a half ago, he followed me on Twitter and we just exchanged pleasantries. And eventually, when I signed on to be doing this full time, I was like, man, I'm going to shoot my shot. I'm going to try to land a big one here. So I did. I said, Matt, give me 5 minutes of your time. I've got an idea that I think you'd be great for. And I knew he'd be great at it because he's so transparent. He's so honest. He's a serial reinventor. He's always been so far ahead of the curve on so many different things. And I thought he'd be great for this sort of long form biographical thing. And he's been awesome. So that's just been incredible. And the
The
wives is
thing about
totally here. So yeah.
we'll follow that up in a second, but the thing about Matt historically post WWE that first time, I mean, he just decided to put all of his stuff out there on the internet, right? He was doing YouTube stuff, and before a lot of these folks were doing YouTube stuff, and so now doing the podcast, it does seem like a natural fit. But how is he to work with? And like, as far as I'm sure you both have. He's a very creative guy, so I'm sure he has an idea, and you have an idea of what you both want to do, and then sort of have to mix it in there together.
Well, it's funny because what I think has worked so well for us is that we both share a pretty similar vision for what we should be talking about and how. And he and I both look at wrestling in a very similar way. And that helps us have really good chemistry. Like a lot of the other podcasts you'll listen to, the host and the talent will kind of bicker a little bit about some things they'll push. we haven't really found ourselves doing that very much. We disagree on some things, but we're very much linear in our way of thinking and the way that we approach wrestling. The first conversation he and I had, he's like, I'm going to be real with you, and you know this, kayfabe is dead. And those that pretend that it's not are doing a disservice to themselves. So let's lean into that. Let's do something that no one else is doing and be transparent. Be honest. Let's take you behind the magic trick of pro wrestling. Acknowledge what's real, what's not, and talk about things in a way that will educate both fans and maybe people within the industry as well.
That's awesome because, in this day and age, with we do this show and it's all about like behind the scenes stuff and our thoughts on the right. Like there's no kayfabe element to this show at all. It is interesting to see a pro wrestler, and Chris Jericho, who's been doing the podcast for a while, he's doing stuff behind the scenes. Most of his interviews are very behind the scenes, non kayfabe. But to see Matt, who's, I don't know, the whole broken hearty thing, and like there is an element, even though it is not a kayfabe character, there's still an acting piece. There's still a storytelling piece. You have a clip on your Twitter of him talking about, or you both talking about the multiverse, and he's correcting you to get the call it the right thing, right? So there is still
universe.
something, right? There
universe,
is still
yeah.
something that he cares about when it comes to that stuff, but it is an interesting way to think about how you guys do it.
Garrett, and you guys touched on something earlier, how Matt's been doing, his first, after he left WWE the first time, like early 2000s, mid 2000s, whatever it was, he came up with a interesting character, and I'll never forget it because people were calling me when they saw these clips go on. So this would have been right before One Night Stand, right? So it would have been 2005. He was doing that whole Angelic Diablo stuff, uploading those crazy videos. And I remember people thought it was so creative and different. And I don't think anybody had seen, up until that point, somebody that was an established star on TV go to the internet and come up with like a really fascinating character.
Well, and even take a step further back, even like V1, for example, like using the WWE website layout and the map fact.
Yeah.
He was embracing technology and internet culture long before anybody else was. And that helped him get so far ahead. I think it's like he and Shane Helms, truthfully, are like the two guys that were the first in wrestling to be like, let's not shy away from this stuff. And that's what I think makes the podcast really effective. And we're doing our Becoming Broken series right now, where we're going from the beginning of the broken character, the genesis of it, all the way to the WrestleMania 33 return. And last week's episode that you referenced, Garrett, was about the final deletion. And we went through the entire final deletion scene by scene and got the why of each thing and how. And I think if you can provide the why and the how to something without any BS, that's intriguing content. And I learned from that. And if I'm learning from that, man, anyone who listens to this thing has to be as well.
So now you have a completely different podcast from Matt Hardy with the Wives of Wrestling. Now, how does that come about? Because, if we are looking at what the Bellas have done and what the Diva Show has done for wrestling fans, we had Brian Danielson on Wrestling Observer Radio several weeks back, and he was telling us how there are a lot of people who know him from those shows and don't know him from actual wrestling, which is kind of amazing when you think about it. So how does this show come about?
So that show, I was approached by my higher-ups, and they just said to me, this is all it was. Kim Orton and Giovanna Angle want to do a podcast, and you're going to host it. Come up with an idea. And it was like, okay. Here's an opportunity to prove myself, because I've come from a journalism background, working in TV news. I've always felt like I've got a pretty good creative muscle. Let me try to flex it and come up with an idea. There was no concept at all. It was just, they want to host a podcast. You've never met them. You've never talked to them before. Come up with an idea. So the Wives of Wrestling podcast was born, and it is very much a lifestyle show. And I've always wanted to host a lifestyle show. I was a finalist for a lifestyle show job about 3-4 years ago, and I was like, this is something that I would love to do because I feel like it can showcase a different side of my personality. But the thing is, when you're doing a lifestyle show, you have to really form a relationship with the people that you're doing it, because it has to be very honest conversation. And the concept then became, what if we did a pro wrestling podcast that's not about pro wrestling? And we got a relationship established between the three of us. They are two firecrackers, and learning how to do personality management combined with a format. We have a swear jar. We play games. We drink on air. It's super fun. And the greatest compliment that I get is when someone will message me or leave a comment. They'll be like, I did not expect to like this, but I love it. It's my guilty pleasure because it's so different. And as you guys know, there's a million pro wrestling podcasts out there. So being different is the biggest key in that sense.
Yeah, finding the niche there is when I first saw it, I was like, wow, this is very interesting because, you know, like you said, there's an angle to it that you don't see a lot of. Now, I think, you know, when it comes to both of the women, like I would imagine that this is part of a bigger thing for them, because I see them on social. They're very good with social. They have a ton of followers. So are they looking to parlay, you know, the show into other stuff as well?
Sure pays to be pretty perfect and popular, doesn't it? Like that really does. Zarian would know, you know. But no, look, I think that I'm sure they would love to parlay it into other projects. I'm not really privy to any of that, but why wouldn't you, right? Like, they're so transparent and honest with their personal lives and putting that out there. And you get these great nuggets of information about not just those two very famous wrestlers, Kurt Angle and Randy Orton, but you get other nuggets about other people. And like in the near future, we're going to be bringing up, we just had Rebby on, which was great because of my connection with Matt. And it just turned into Let's Crap All Over John hour, which was fun too. But like in the future, we'll have other guests that, like, I don't know, who's to say like we couldn't have Paul White's wife on? And what great insight would you get from that, right? Like totally different and different perspective. So I want us to expand in that sense first. And I'm sure the ladies would love to do more projects like that.
No, sounds like some great stuff, and you know, you are doing a ton, and you know, we're starting to see. It's interesting because of the field that we're all in, podcasting. We all like to talk, probably maybe talk even a little bit too much, but you utilizing your voice, utilizing your presence. You mentioned broadcasting school. You know, I have a broadcasting degree as well, journalism. So it's very cool to see all the things you're doing. And, you know, that's what makes you the perfect guest for us for this show, because, you know, Andrew and I are sort of very influenced by a lot of the similar things growing up. You know, we're both big Howard Stern fans. And then what did Howard do? Oh, Howard went to broadcasting, you know, that whole thing. So I love just meeting people who are doing similar things, because usually we find out that our backgrounds are kind of similar in how we got into all of this. So very cool stuff. Okay, let's move on to WrestleMania. Obviously, it's the big thing of the weekend. Comes around once a year. WWE puts so much into this weekend. We have 2 shows. So my first question, and I'm going to give props to my co-host here. Feel like I haven't heard enough about how Andrew broke this story of Seth Rollins being added to WrestleMania by Vince McMahon.
Well,
I'll set it up for you. Yeah. When Sunday, we're doing Wrestling Observer Live. Andrew has this scoop. We talk about it. It's out there. And then we assume that it's going to be on Raw. And as I'm doing something Monday, I was writing something, and I was like, wait, they're giving away the whole thing on Twitter. What's going on here? And then they also showed it on Raw, but I thought that was really weird. But Andrew, not enough. You've not been given enough acclaim. I have not seen Scoop Zarian trending on Twitter for this storyline. Break it down. Like, what did you think about what they did? And you can talk a little bit about your side.
Yeah, on Friday I was sent an image, and it was like, you know, it pretty much said Vince is, I don't remember the exact word. Vince is selecting Seth's opponent, or who does Vince select for his opponent? And I was like, "Where's this from?" And then, my conversation continued, and I found out where it was from, and I was like, "When is this going out?" So I know. I was told not to put anything out till Monday because whatever was happening was going to happen during Raw. That's all they knew. That whenever this is fired, publicly to push that tweet out or whatever they were doing with it. And I see Seth Rollins tweeted that he had a meeting with Vince. I was like, okay, this is happening. They're going through with this. But essentially, I mean, they were. It's funny because the person that sent this to me was really annoyed personally because it was WWE did it in a very different way and they weren't prepared when this happened, So I don't know if they were going to tweet it. There was an image that was supposed to go to other people, whatever it was. They were really frustrated with it and pretty much told me like, yeah, they screwed me up or they screwed up the team or something like that. With the way that it was announced, but I thought they did an interesting job. People were fascinated by Vince's chemistry. I mean, Vince is hysterical to look at. Watching him interact with anybody is, amazing. You're just glued to him. I thought they did a decent job, and I'm just waiting. I'm just waiting that Seth's in the ring at Mania. Vince comes out and goes, "I have your perfect opponent." He does this whole thing, blah, 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 and it's Goldberg.
Okay. Or Shane,
and you will see. You will see. I mean, or Shane.
Oh
and
my
you will
gosh.
see for the first time. You will witness. Okay, you will witness people's souls leaving their bodies in that building. You will see it. It's like the rapture. They're all leaving. I don't think it's Shane. I don't think it's Goldberg. They have to do Cody at this point. It's kind of set. They've set themselves up for failure if it's not. By not. I guess they never even told you Cody, so they didn't do anything wrong. We did something wrong, right? If it's not Cody, we all screwed him up.
Well, it's kind of like the CM Punk thing with AEW, right? Like they kind of leaned into it, and it's good. It was effective with CM Punk, and WWE's kind of done the same with the subtle Cody Rhodes references over the past few weeks. So it's been effective in that sense.
Okay, so is a great point. It was something that I was going to mention, but John, Andrew and I have talked about what we think about how they've been doing this. Seth is a great entertainer, so he's doing great work while maybe this story isn't really great for him. But if you go back to when Cody left AEW, and you probably had some creative thoughts yourself about how you would introduce him in WWE, how does this match what you wanted to see?
I just am a big proponent of promoting things ahead of time. And for me, vignettes and storytelling, like character building, that's all really important for me when I watch pro wrestling, because I kind of lean into my background as a storyteller and in TV news. And I think all the time about laying the groundwork for setting your character up, and the audience needs to form a bond with them within the first 10 seconds of your story. So if someone is cold debuting at WrestleMania, thankfully in this case, it's a familiar face that people know, but I would have liked to have seen more of that. For me, where I lose a little bit of a connection with the story is, how can I believe that Seth Rollins, with his street cred, can't just challenge anyone to get on the WrestleMania card, especially when you get celebrities coming on to this show just so easily getting matches. Why can't Seth Rollins, a former multi-time world champion, just challenge someone and get on the card, right? So he is entertaining. He's really good at what he does, but I haven't quite as much loved it as some other people have seemed to, and that's fine. Everyone's got a different taste.
Well, Vince said, right? Why don't you just come to me, man? I'm
Yeah,
the one who calls
yeah.
the shots. Why don't you just
That's
ask
right.
me for a match?
He's right.
Yeah, he's like,
So
"What,
that
what are you,
there's
stupid?"
there are definitely some holes in this, because also, as Andrew noted on Wrestling Observer Live, there are people who have titles who are not on this show. They're on the Friday SmackDown show, doing whatever they're going to do on Friday. So not true that, even if you have a title, you don't have that road to WrestleMania there. Okay.
How do you feel
So
about that,
let's-
Garrett? I wanted to ask you that before. I forgot to ask you on Observer. How do you feel about not every title being defended on a WrestleMania? Because technically, I mean, WrestleMania is where every title should be defended.
And you have two nights.
And you have two nights.
And you have pre-shows and, you know, all the stuff that they throw at you for that stuff. So, I mean, I think it's pretty poor for those guys. And, you know, Ricochet, the way he was booked on Friday was pretty terrible in of itself. So, yeah, I don't know why. And plus, they built up Finn and Damian Priest to a point where I was like, huh, let's keep it going. And then when it wasn't on that show, they're not even having a match. They're both in a battle royal. And you're like, what went wrong there? Where did they go left on accident? So I don't know. But while we have John's time, we have John for a little bit less than 10 minutes. I wanted to bring up one more thing, which is the news that, and Kevin Owens said it last night, Dave Meltzer said it last night, the idea that Austin and Owens at the KO show is going to be the main event segment, which to me says they believe they're going to have more than just a stunner and cracking of the beers. Because if they were only going to do that, I would imagine it would be earlier in the show. But there's a segment of the wrestling audience, the wrestling population, who think, wow, Ronda and Charlotte should be the closer because they are the title match. And my argument is they're going to be unable to follow Austin if he actually does have some semblance of a match. What do you think about KO and Austin and that whole thing being the main event?
Yeah, 100% agree with what you said about following that. It's just you're setting anyone up for failure. It doesn't really matter who it is, honestly. You're kind of setting them up for failure. And for the record, I think Ronda and Charlotte are going to have a really good match. But I'm with you entirely. My gut says, and I know nothing. This is not me reporting anything. I don't really do that anymore. This is just me speculating, and maybe Andrew can shut me down on this. My gut says that a bell will ring and there will be some sort of unsanctioned match or street fight or something set up by some talking beforehand, kind of akin to Rock and Rowan, hopefully longer than that and more detailed than that, but that a match will happen in some sort. And like, let's think about it, guys. Like, everyone's like, I don't know if Austin can go. What was every Stone Cold Steve Austin match for the last 3 to 4 years of his career, right? Brawl, sell, Luthez press, stunner. That's it. That's all he's got to do. And who better to help him do that than a guy like Kevin Owens?
I mean, theoretically, that's his entire WWF career because when he was in WCW, he was actually more of like a worker, and then he got hurt and he had to change the style, and so that's what became, and then that's his biggest star as a wrestler. Andrew, this is a very, very important question for you, and I feel like you're the perfect person to answer this question. Does Stone Cold Steve Austin take off his T-shirt on Saturday night to do the match?
Oh, I hope so. I want him to be all beefed up. Dude, his arms are jacked. He looks great. Listen, I'm a body guy, man. I got to tell you, like, by the way, I agree with John. I think they're going to start it off. You know, they'll come down to the ring. Once Austin's music hits, they'll do like something, and a bell will ring, you know, or they'll do something where they brawl, they do whatever. You know, if they're in the main event, by the way, I agree with the fact that they should be in the main event. If they were doing just the segment, this would have been in the middle of the card, you know, where it doesn't take anything.
Yes.
What?
Yes.
Or even opening the show,
or even opening the show.
Yeah,
or opening the show if it's a segment like that. You know, by putting in the main event, you're making people, first of all, expect something. You can't just do a talk show at the end and be like, all right, guys, see you guys later after a stunner. They're going to have to do something. And they've already mentioned, I mean, Austin's video promo said, whether you want to call this a match or a fight or whatever. So they've alluded beyond this is just a segment. I feel bad that Ronda and Charlotte are not in the main event. I think they're going to have a great match, but you don't want to follow this. You know, let's say they do 6, 7, 8 minutes. And my God, it's awesome. How do you go from that to your title match? You can't. It's gonna suck all the energy out of the room. I think he will not wear his undies. I think he's gonna wear his shorts, his jean shorts with the knee brace, and I think maybe we'll get he'll take a shirt off. I hope he takes his shirt off. Also, you know what? It's gonna matter. You know how it matters? How tan is he when he shows up? That's what I want to put my bet on.
Of course, yes.
Yeah,
Yes,
I'm
that
sure there's a
always
website where I could bet on how tan he is.
So I think the one thing, and we'll end it here because we know John has to go. We'll let John get some plugs in. The one thing that I would be worried about if in following Austin is that Austin, if the fans bought that ticket for Austin and Owens, and then they're like, we got what we wanted, let's bail, let's beat traffic. That would look really bad for the main event. So that's another thing. And this is not Charlotte and Ronda's fault in any way. It's just Stone Cold friggin' Steve Austin in Texas. And that's the thing. So I still think, like you guys, Ronda and Charlotte, I think it's going to be good. I think they both have something to prove here. But ultimately, Austin has to close, or else, we're just like, the crowd could possibly be deflated or leaving. So, and you don't want that to be the end.
Garrett, I also have one more bold prediction on that front. And again, Andrew can totally crap all over this and tell me that I'm wrong, but I don't think this will be the last of action we see from Stone Cold Steve Austin.
I'm going to say
50-50,
depending on how he feels.
On how it
I
goes.
think it's really going to come down to that. Yeah. I think once he's in there, and you start getting loosened up and you see that crowd, dude, I mean, it took years for this to leave his system, right? And he didn't want to do anything for a long time because of that. So now to kind of go headfirst in and kick it up a notch like that, I don't know if he's gonna wanna just disappear again. I don't see that happening. I think he's going to stick around.
Well, the last time we said this, Andrew, you got aggravated as to saying that Austin and Goldberg is happening. So let's not have that happen again, because that is not what we are saying.
Listen, maybe Lesnar.
Well, Lesnar and Roman both referenced the what chance and called him out on Raw. So they're both throwing it out there. All right, John, quickly get some plugs in. Where can people find you? Where can people find the shows that you host? All that stuff.
Yeah, well, first off, I really do appreciate you guys having me on to chat here today. Big fan of everything that you guys do with your respective projects and together. You can find me on Twitter at Jon Alba, JONALBA. Lose the H's are for losers. You can find me as the host of The Extreme Life of Matt Hardy, which drops every Friday wherever you get your podcasts. The Wise of Wrestling podcast, your weekly Monday happy hour, wherever you get your podcasts. And on adfreeshows.com, I host like 15 shows on there too. So there's a lot of good stuff going on and no shortage of that hashtag Audible Chocolate. And man, I'm so grateful. And Andrew, you and I definitely have to get together and do the whole like Spider-Man meme pointing at each other.
Oh, we got to do it. We're gonna do it.
It'll happen eventually.
So next time we'll give John a little bit more of a heads up, and we'll get him on here for the whole hour. But we do appreciate you coming on here, John, and talking on the road to WrestleMania. Good stuff that you're doing. Keep doing it, and good luck.
Thank you so much, guys. Really appreciate it.
All right, Andrew. We
Yes,
we have a little bit of more WrestleMania stuff to talk about, but that was really cool. I'd never met John before. I'd always wanted to meet him. Glad that you made the connection and we were able to bring him on. He's doing some really good stuff, and for guys like us who
stuff.
We have a day job, this wrestling stuff is really fun. If it seems like it's pretty much his gig, and it's so cool to see somebody able to take their passion and make it their full-time gig and make it their career. That's a really cool thing.
Yeah, no, he's really onto some really cool stuff. Listen, man, I absolutely love it. I didn't come from pro wrestling. I didn't think I would do this. I've just enjoyed it, and now it's like, it's part of my life to an extent where this is what I do, and it's a cool little thing for me, and I love seeing people be super successful at this and be passionate about it, and really do something really nice with it. And he's on a roll. He's been on a roll for sure.
Yeah. The whole thing about Matt Hardy and this idea is like, it's kind of what you want, because us as hardcore wrestling fans, I'm sure there are moments when you were like, oh, I wish my favorite wrestler had this avenue. Like, I'll actually give you an example. So AEW, before they even started, I had this idea but I don't have the connection to these guys. But I was like, the Young Bucks pre All Elite Wrestling have this wild story, and they eventually wrote their autobiography, and they have that book out, and they told that story. But I was like, it would be great to go all the way back to the beginning and do it in episodes. Like, let's talk about the TNA, let's talk about New Japan, let's talk about all these different things, and have the last episode of that podcast debut the day AEW's first television show happens. Like, there's things that, I'll think about stuff like that often, but I was like, that would have been my one dream project, where if I had the connection, and I probably could have had the connection if I really wanted it, but that's just stuff like that. Like, for Jon to have this idea, Matt Hardy's his favorite wrestler, for Matt to come in and go, oh yeah, I have a similar idea, let's do it. I mean, it's just meant to be. What a great deal there.
It is. For sure.
All right, so let's talk about more WrestleMania stuff. And I guess I'm interested in what you think is the top thing on this show. What is the thing that you are the most interested in watching both nights, that you're like, if I was a casual fan, this is the thing that would connect me to making sure I ordered Peacock to watch this show?
So I don't, everybody watches it for a different reason. I think the Austin stuff is really intriguing to people, but I'm curious if people even, like the casual fan, do they know Austin is involved, right? Like I'm trying to gauge it that way, but I think people know that he's going to be there. I don't think people know to what capacity, and how they're working, but definitely night 2, that title unification or whatever they're calling it, that's definitely a huge deal. I would say that is probably the biggest one. Seeing Ronda for a segment of the viewership is another big deal, but I think it's going to be Austin at the end, or Cody for there's a lot of moving parts here, right? And we could criticize what they do and how they do it. I know that you have some Raw numbers, Garrett, which I know you're going to bring up, but at the end of the day, they have done a decent job on paper. We don't know how it's going to execute, but on paper, they have something for everybody.
Yeah, so I think what you said, Austin and Cody, are the most intriguing things from the perspective of, there's a little bit of mystery behind it, right? Like, a lot of times when we watch wrestling, we kind of know what's gonna, we're pretty sure what's gonna happen, whether it's because we're reading the Observer or we're just really in tune with the product. And those two things are kind of surprises, like surprises in the sense of, how are they going to do it? How are they going to, what should we expect versus what's going to be delivered? I would say the thing that has me the most drawn is Brock and Roman, and here's why. They have the opportunity to have the best match that they've ever had. Now, for Roman, he's never beaten Brock at WrestleMania. He mentioned that on his promo last night. For Brock, he looks like he's having the absolute time of his life. He did the wackiest promo yesterday, doing all the what chant stuff. Like, he did the Paul Heyman introduction, and then he was like, oh, by the way, it wasn't that good, and I'll probably never ever do that again. But this guy is like, this is the happiest go luckiest Brock we've ever seen. And maybe this is more towards what his real personality is. But because he's a beast. But I think that being fans of both of theirs, now this is, I don't think this is a casual fan perspective at all, but I want to see that 4.5 star match, that 4 3/4 star match. And if all of the universe aligns correctly, that possible 5-star match between these guys, because they are so good, yet they haven't had that one match. I guess you could say WrestleMania 31, where it became the 3-way where Seth cashed in. That was the best one that they've had for sure. And Roman took a legit beating in that match. I want to see them get to that level. And Brock has even mentioned, that he kind of cares about that. He wants to have a good match. He's trying to have a good match. And so that's where my main interest is on Sunday night after that main event is over. Does it feel like the spectacle that they've been building it to? Now, it's probably good betting odds to take the under on 4 stars because that's generally what we've seen so far, even of late in their matches. But that's what I am most drawn to. I want to see these guys have that, that great, Brock. His very first WrestleMania 19, has this, upcoming. They're building to a classic in this match.
He nearly killed
Young
himself.
Brock, and then he almost kills himself, and then it goes to hell. But that was a great match, and he's had some good matches at WrestleMania, but I think he's most remembered for the breaking the streak, which I never really was into that moment that much. But this is his opportunity to really just put his stamp, I think, as a great pro wrestler, and that's what I'm looking forward to.
Yeah.
You mentioned
I agree with you. No, I agree with you, and I do think they're gonna have 4+ star match. I'll say that. I with the build that they've had, I don't see how they can't, unless they just totally shit the bed, during a match. Which I can't see Roman doing that. I can't see Brock doing that.
You need to parlay that. You need to parlay plus 4 stars and Austin takes his shirt off. I wonder what the odds are for that.
Oh, dude, what are the odds on that?
All right, so you mentioned the Raw ratings, and they came out earlier today, and I just clicked on Brandon Thurston's tweet. They're way up. They did almost 2 million viewers, and I don't think they've hit that since the summer, or close to that since the summer. So much so that last week they did 1.769. The 18 to 49 was at a 0.50. So this, I think, yesterday was a 0.55. But yeah, almost back up to 2 million viewers for the Raw Go Home. That's surprising to me. I didn't expect it because I wonder what. I mean, I guess when you put Brock and Roman both on the same show, you're gonna build it a little bit. But their 10-week average for the last 10 weeks, 1.691. So that is quite the increase for that Go Home show. Very happy to see that.
Yeah. No, I interesting, right? People are into it. The build is working for them. They're up what, like 10%, right? Be a 10%? Yeah, about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm curious comparing it to pre-pandemic numbers, what the numbers were. I got to look at them. But, we're talking 2 million people versus 1.6 million. That's a big jump. But you're right. You had Brock on there. You had Roman on. You had a ton happening. And also people were anticipating more to happen. So I think between the anticipation of it and wanting to see what happens next, it drew some eyeballs. I don't know. I guess it wasn't that competitive a night either.
Yeah, I haven't seen anything else, but of course, you want to look a little bit. You want to dig a little bit more closely in these numbers and see what it is segment by segment. But yeah, good stuff for them. Very very happy that they were able to bring more fans in on the right night. Like like this is kind of the best time to have that high rating because you're leading into the big show of the year. So good stuff. Okay, now change gears a little bit because it's not only WWE who is running shows this weekend. There's lots of stuff going on. There's Bloodsport. There's GCW. There's New Japan US. The first Tony Khan ROH show. Lots and lots of stuff going on this weekend. What are you going to try and watch? And, obviously you're watching WrestleMania. I don't know about NXT, but what are you going to make sure to watch on maybe the craziest wrestling weekend of the year?
Definitely I'm going to watch Ring of Honor. I'm curious to see what Tony does with it. If there's a difference, booking philosophy wise or even presentation wise, I don't think it's going to be a different presentation right now. I can't imagine. I mean, listen, unless they do something crazy, which is great. I want to see what it looks like, how it feels, where this goes, because we still don't have some sort of syndication or a network deal or streaming deal. We don't have that. Maybe we'll get an answer at the show because Tony says that he's going to have it on. So I'm really curious about that. I want to see Who else is going to show up? Is CM Punk on the show? Is Danielson on the show? These are all things that I think it's a really cool moment for wrestling fans. But the other thing, I'm definitely going to watch NXT because this is their first show outside of Florida since right before the pandemic when they had TakeOver in Portland, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That was the last one they did, 2020, right? February 2020.
Yeah, that was, if I remember, that was a really great show too.
Yeah, so they haven't really
remember.
done. Yeah. By the way, what a big night and day difference, right, between the two products, that show and this show.
Yeah.
I don't, the crowd's going to be hot. They're going to be into it. It's, WrestleMania weekend. A lot of people are still traveling for the show. We're back to people traveling, unlike last year. So, it could turn out to be something very positive for NXT. And also, think about it. If people are behind this and Braun Breaker does something tremendous and people get really behind it, it could hotshot the whole promotion. For Tuesday. They're gonna benefit from being outside of that building, and maybe this becomes a little bit of a regular thing that they go back to quarterlies, depending on how successful this is, where they go into maybe 2,000, 3,000 person buildings, and they can run something really cool in those venues.
So I'm going to give you a UFC comparison here. So the UFC, they have their own Apex building, right? They run their small shows. And I think early in the pandemic, they were running their pay-per-views out of that building too. So the Apex is like where they do Dana White's Contender Series, and it's like their own gym building. And so they started to run pay-per-views outside of the Apex. And I think they've done X number of sellouts in a row. They've done 2 fight nights. Last week was in Columbus, and the previous week was in London. Both sellouts as well. 14 straight sellouts, not a ticket unsold for the UFC. And I feel like this is like the most underreported stat. Like for whatever reason, like not a lot of people are keeping up with this because we look at wrestling shows, right? Like AEW, they are selling out their pay-per-views. The last couple was it the last? I don't know what the number is since they got out of Daly's place. I think they've sold all of those shows out. WWE is not selling every single show out, so they're like you wouldn't consider UFC, like as far as your friends talking about it. I don't think you would consider UFC to be in a hot period, right? Just by sort of what's going on in the UFC, who the stars are. They don't draw crazy TV ratings, but for whatever reason, that live audience is resonating with that product. And I kind of wonder what you said, which is, can we get friggin' NXT out of that CWC? Because I think that hurts the show so much. And this hopefully will be a launching point. Now, I don't think that they're going to start running TVs and try to sell real tickets. I think they're only at like 3,600 or something as of the last time I looked for this show.
Out of what, 5,000?
Out of 5,000 that they have the building set up for. But there is a relationship between a real live audience and a product that is supposed to be on the rise or young and have young personalities, right? Now, this is not to discredit that NXT home base, because that NXT home base does a great job. That is their home product. They really dig it. But I want to see a real audience with that product. And I think it also helped the wrestlers, but it's just not a cost-effective way to do it unless they're sure that they could actually sell tickets. Who knows? Yeah. But I'm with you. Like that is going to be the thing that I'm looking at more so than even the work, is just the reactions.
Let me just say this also, and this is a very like gauging, right? You said it's a younger product. Who's watching NXT though? Because I could tell you, it's not the kids.
No,
they're not watching NXT. And you know what's fascinating? And this is, you have, you got older kids, right? But
yes,
when your kids were small, there was always kids with wrestling shirts. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like they would always wear the wrestling shirts. It was always all around. My son's friends, none of them. My daughter's friends, none of them. None of them watch wrestling.
What are they?
6, 7 years old. 5, 6, 7. They are into, the typical stuff, Batman, Spider-Man, Iron Man,
Mhm.
all that stuff. But wrestling is not one of those things. And even like sports, like I remember when I was 6 years old, I was rocking that Mets cap. I had the Mets gear. Like I
Yeah,
was all in. All my friends were in. It's a very
me
different
too.
media consumption. These kids are not brought up on network television or standard broadcast. They are brought up on 5 to 12-minute YouTube videos.
Yep.
That's how they consume media. So
JoJo
this says a
Siwa.
lot. Jojo Siwa, that's another one. Or Ryan's Toy Review or whatever,
Yep.
they're watching. My kids are watching this woman that takes squishies and does squishy makeovers. Like those little, like the cartoon
Awesome.
squishies. Just
Yes.
she draws on them and does stuff. I think it's an interesting thing when you have NXT and they are attempting to cater to a younger audience. You need a core building, right? Like you need to build a core, and this is how WWE is projecting this. They realize this, that kids aren't, maybe it got too adult for them, and that's why they've reverted back a little bit, and it's a little bit more cartoonish. The ebbs and flows, but I have to tell you, the interest in NXT as far as youth goes, it doesn't exist really.
It's
You
just
know,
a fourth hour.
it's
It's just an extra hour of WWE is what it is.
it's just another 2 hours, right?
Yeah, another 2 hours. Sorry.
Another 2 hours of WWE, but without people that you see on the main roster. I mean, that's really what it is. And that's what it was before with NXT. NXT was for us 35-year-olds, 40-year-olds. That's who was watching it. I find that to be interesting. I do think this weekend there are probably going to be a lot more kids in that audience for NXT. I think more kids
Yes.
are going to watch NXT live than they do normally, that visually. I'm curious how this show changes or doesn't change the trajectory of NXT right now, because I think it will. I think it's going to change something depending on how good that show is.
Uh, we're talking about trying to draw a younger audience, and it may be impossible, like you said, because everything is in these short segments of 10 minutes or whatever. There's somebody who's supposed to debut for AEW in the Owens Cup qualifier, I believe, facing the Bunny. And for the longest time, I've thought, you want to attract young boys to watch your product? Tony Storm is like the perfect person to do so. Now, I don't know if it's her. It could be Ember. It could be a number of women. But can you? This is just more of a question for you. Can a character attract young people just by being that character, or is wrestling so much predominantly an older audience that it doesn't really matter? Like AEW does a really good job of getting a younger audience, but as they get more popular, it's the older audience that is going to catch on more so than increasing their 18 to 49. The extra 100,000 or whatever that they add to their number will probably be like the over 50s. But what do you think about that? Is there a perfect wrestler or a perfect character that can create that young audience to come to a product these days?
Yeah, absolutely. And listen, when I look at stuff, I see it through a marketing lens, right? That's my background. I don't see it through. I mean, obviously, I like what I like, and I don't like what I don't like, but I don't ever blend the two, really, right? Like I'm able to separate. Like I think this is good because it'll get here, but I could also say this isn't for me. I think that you're absolutely right. It is possible for one person to kind of change the demo as far as viewership goes. We saw that with Steve Austin.
Yes.
We saw that with even Hogan. Hogan really, I think people forget how young wrestling got after, like, because of Hogan. It's something that's rarely talked about how he changed the demo numbers as far as who was watching wrestling. Prior to Hulk Hogan, you would go to the Garden, you're watching, it's filled with old men smoking cigarettes and drinking and screaming. It wasn't a family friendly event for a long time. And then it became cartoonish and became more, mainstream, more kid friendly. So I definitely think, one or two people could change the trajectory of your demo. I think for AEW, by the way, NXT's doing that with Nikita. That is targeting 14, 13-year-old boys.
You're talking about
Dolan,
the Russian
another
Nightmare,
one.
right?
No, not Nikita.
Not Nikita Koloff. You're talking about
not
the
Nikita
new,
Koloff. Yeah.
yeah.
Dusty Rhodes. No, the other Nikita. Ric Flair. That's isn't that a great Nikita?
That's
My
a really good
grandfather was a
Nikita.
huge. My grandfather used to do it, and he used to do the Baron all the time. My grandfather was a huge Baron fan because he looked like him. My grandfather was Baron von Raschke. I mean, I'm telling you, same voice, same accent. But again, Gigi Dolan targets teenage boys. I mean, they're trying. Here's another one. Private Party, right on the other side.
Yes.
They target a younger demo.
What about Darby?
Darby, did I say this to you or somebody else said it? I said Darby in I know this is a crazy concept, right? But Darby would be such a perfect tool for WWE if they were. If I'm not agreeing with this. Again, don't attack me for this. But think about how they would market Darby.
Yeah,
it would be like Rey Mysterio. They would have an opportunity to have like a Rey Mysterio on their hands with all the dolls, the squishies, the toys, the face paint, the mask. They would be, because they're such a machine, they would be able to turn this into something tremendous, and he would be like a Rey Mysterio type for kids. That's who he would. I mean, he wouldn't be doing half the stuff he's doing now, but he would be targeting kids. AEW's doing good with this, but they just don't have the I would say the word is slipping in my mind. They don't have the positioning as far as longevity goes to have all those arms as far as marketing goes and network partners and things like that. Compared to WWE, that's been doing, this version of marketing their product, becoming a toy company for the last 35 years. AEW only has 3.
And do you know they just signed a deal with Fanatics?
I saw that. Yeah, I saw that.
So Fanatics is going to run the WWE Shop Zone. And then Fanatics is also going to take over their card license whenever so what happened is Topps owned the Fanatics license, or owned the WWE license, and then Fanatics bought Topps. Then Panini jumped on the WWE license. So whenever that Panini license is over, I think Fanatics just gets it back, probably under the Topps brand, and also they're going to do NFTs under the company that the Fanatics owner he has a partnership in. Yeah, man.
Nick is I would say there's been nobody like him in pro wrestling. I know a lot of people that have worked with him. He really is in sports franchising. I mean, in reality, this is the reality. We only see, when you hear about Nick Khan and you see the arguments on Twitter, people don't realize pro wrestling has never had somebody like him. Good or bad, we don't know longevity-wise, but there's been nobody that is such a deal maker in professional wrestling like him. He's really... WWE is going to be a very different company in the next 10 years. I say this all the time. The future of WWE is going to be a Vegas-style show also. They're going to have a residency at MGM or something. This is how I see it playing out, because what better way to get your product across and constantly sell stuff, right? These are just going to be different arms that they're going to incorporate. It's not going to be the small mom and pop shop that happened to go public and running under Vince. This is going to become very similar to how the NFL or MLB is run. It's going to be a sport franchise.
The two most important people in wrestling, in my opinion, I hate it when I have to say my opinion. Like, it should be, people should know that it's just my opinion. It's coming out of my mouth. But Nick Khan and Tony Khan, those are the two most important people in the wrestling business, US today, probably the world too. But what Nick has done with WWE to, make that IP more valuable, create more revenue streams off of essentially the same stuff over and over and over again. The TV deals that they have and how they'll, I'm sure they're already revving up on doing that again. And then obviously Tony Khan working from, I don't know if he actually sleeps, but all the time and effort he's put in to make this AEW brand what it is in such a short amount of time. Those are the two most important people in wrestling. And I know it's like, oh, but what about Brock and what about CM Punk? But those guys are great, but these guys are making the business that we get to see, the product that we get to see. Those, in order for these things to be everlasting and to not be, Eric Bischoff's WCW, those guys are doing it right now.
Yeah, and you got to look at, they both have very not so similar, but they do have similar background. They come from the sporting world. They come from the
They have
marketing
the
world. They
same last
understand.
name.
Same last name, but two different cons.
Yeah, yeah.
They're two very different cons. I think
Yes.
Nick is Persian.
Yes.
I think when I met him,
I
I
think
think
so.
I think we spoke about that. Our families have a similar background, but it's very interesting, man. And the industry is shifting. It's changing. I always say, and I've been saying this for the last year, SummerSlam was the moment that I saw the difference. I finally, this whole sports entertainment versus pro wrestling thing, going from SummerSlam and then going to All Out, a couple weeks later, my God, it was like I took off those rose-colored glasses and I saw for what it is. I don't see WWE for being pro wrestling anymore. It has pro wrestling elements, but to me, Monday Night Raw is a variety show. Like on like an NBC variety show. It's the Muppets. It's a live action version of the Muppets. And I'm not saying that in a bad way. I'm saying that as far as what I see. They have wrestling aspect to it. But at the end of the day, what did I learn from that Seth Rollins and Vince McMahon segment? I learned that this is a show. It's a TV show that's been on the air for like 30-something years, like a soap opera, like a dynasty. General Hospital. I'm dating myself now. All My Children. What else do we have? What else is a soap show? But it's
Young and the Restless.
It's about Young and the Restless. It's about a family that owns a small business or a family business, and it's them trying to manage all their bonehead employees. They have the most incompetent staff ever, and it's this family and this tycoon that's trying to keep the wheels on this train. That's how I see it. That I swear to you, and people get so offended that I see it that way, but I don't see it as the pro wrestling that I grew up with in the 90s. Even though that was a male soap opera.
It's not today. It's not even that anymore. What we grew up in watching.
No,
so.
AEW is closer for sure.
Yeah. All right. Last question, and we may go a few minutes over time here. Completely different direction of this show, because I want to ask you about the story that maybe Tony Khan and MJF had to have a conversation about the interview that MJF did with Ariel Helwani. I guess he didn't run it by the crew like he was supposed to. And, that was reported in a couple different areas. But what do you think about this whole thing? Because you've been on the WWE's interested in MJF for just about as long as anybody.
Yeah, so that story is interesting to me. I sent it to you. Where was it? It was on where? The MJF thing, the most recent one?
So I think Sean originally reported it.
Yes.
Dave and Brian talked about it last night. Sean may have even had some more on it today, as far as maybe there being even more to the discussion, like about maybe he's unhappy with this contract or something.
Yeah, the story that he's supposed to run it by Tony. Yeah, I get that. You should be running everything by, but does everybody run everything by Tony? All those interviews?
Maybe they do.
I'm
Maybe
curious.
they do. I don't know.
Maybe they do.
I'm not sure. Like, I know that, and I hope this doesn't get us in trouble, but I don't think Dave runs anything by Tony. I think he works with the talent to get the guys that we work with, but maybe they then just give the team a heads up going, hey, we're going to go on Wrestling Observer Radio, just FYI.
Yeah, it's quite possible that's how they do it, and they trust the avenue that it's on, because that's a big part of it too. You have to trust who's doing the interview, because the reality is you don't want to put someone with to make your talent look like a fool. Not that that's going to happen with MJF because he's so sharp, but I thought him and Helwani did a good interview. I thought it was a pretty honest interview. He always kind of stays in character, which that's his gimmick. But they were talking about contracts. He said my contract ends January 1st, 2024, and he's looking for the highest bidder. Of course he is. Why wouldn't he be? He's 20-something years old, and I think it really has a lot to do with how Cody does. At the end of the day, Cody leaving.
I'm sure he's watching Cody very closely.
Cody leaving. I've been in scenarios like this in other avenues. Cody leaving kind of changed stuff for certain people, especially over there, where now it's like, oh, okay, Cody left. Maybe I could go and get something more. And that's gonna happen.
Are you saying you've had competitors offer you $1 million deals to come to their to
I
run
have had
their
I
spot?
have had competitors offer me to go somewhere else, but I have to tell you, we play for the Yankees, man. What can I tell you? I get to throw the ball with Derek Jeter. I may not be hitting those home runs, but I could throw that ball during practice, man. I'm a Mets fan, by the way. For all the people that are like, how come we talking about the Yankees? You're from Queens. I'm a Mets fan. I just can't
So
use that example for the Mets.
here's an interesting comparison. So I've been rewatching 90. Last year rewatched all of 97 Raw. This year rewatching 98 Raw. Do a podcast on our Patreon, and I was reading through the Observer from this time, 1998. So if you remember WrestleMania 14, the next night, Sean Waltman comes over to WWF. He's part of, Triple H says that Sean, made a mistake and now he's running the show, brings over X-Pac. And then later that night, the Road Dogg and Billy Gunn joined D-Generation X. So I was reading through the story and Dave wrote, that originally when Waltman got fired by WCW, by Eric Bischoff, it was kind of like a power play thing because he was showing Hall and Nash that, he could fire their buddy, essentially, is what was he reported. So when he hits the open market, WWF is kind of cold on him. They were not going to offer him any more than what WCW was offering him. And then he was going to have to work more dates. So he's actually working for less money, essentially.
Losing money. Yeah.
So then as this war is heating up and as WWF is turning the corner with Austin 98, they bump the offer up. I think Dave had mentioned it was like from $250 to $350. So their offer jumped a whole $100,000 because of this wrestling war. And Dave wrote, and I feel like this is kind of an underreported thing even from back then, Dave wrote at the time that the people who were feeling disgruntled at WCW, who knew what WWF's first offer to Waltman was, and they were like, there's nothing over there. Like, if they're not even going to pay us what we're worth, we're just going to be unhappy here. But then they bump up Waltman's pay, and then they go, oh, now they're willing to pay market value for talent. So that, we're going back 24 years, right? But it's the same scenario today, right? WWE is now back paying fair market for the tippy top talent, right? For the guys who are worth it. And I'm sure the guys in AEW who may not be getting the best push right now, or, maybe there's a lot of talent there and they're not getting booked the way that they want. Nobody is. Essentially, nobody should be happy about the way they're being booked, right? They always want to go higher and higher and higher. Maybe they now look at Cody and go, A, WWE is going to pay what we're worth, and B, now how are they going to use them? So exactly what you said, MJF's got to be watching Cody with the Hawk, and other people who are in AEW are going to be watching Cody like a hawk, which is why it's very important for WWE to not screw this one up.
Listen, like a great example, like a Wardlow, right? Wardlow is hot right now in AEW. I don't know what his contract status is. I don't know how happy, unhappy. I don't know. I think he should be happy. He's getting a nice little push here, and you're kind of developing this talent. But, you build this guy up. He becomes a big star in, let's say, the next 18 months, whatever. And he gets a tremendous offer. Who am I to tell him he shouldn't take it? And who is anybody to tell him not to take it? He's going to do whatever is best for him and for his future. This is a very short career. The guys in the business that are there for 20 some odd years making millions of dollars, that's an anomaly. That's historically been an anomaly. And this is a business where your career could end with a baseball slide. I'm using it as an example, but it's very possible. Things happen. Big E has a tremendous scare by breaking, by fracturing a C1 and C6. I mean, that is, you put your body on the line. I know. Listen, we could talk about how it's pretend, and I'm using hand quotes here, and it's play fighting, but this is a very dangerous job. These guys are stuntmen that do their own. They do their own stunts. They're actors that do their own stunts. They do crazy off the wall stuff, and one little tweak could change. One little twerk, the wrong business, wrong business.
Twerk it out.
One little tweak. One little tweak could end your career. Listen, you're gonna go make $3, $4, $5 million a year. another person's offering you $1.5 million, you take that $4, $5 million. I don't know. I'm not that's not numbers for anybody. I'm just using an example here. But
Yes.
like, people are mad at Cody. Like, listen, I really enjoyed him in
Not me.
AEW. I would have liked this. You didn't like him in AEW. You
No,
hated him
I'm
in
saying
AEW.
I'm not mad at Cody.
I'm not mad.
Okay. I'm rooting for this dude because the
too.
better he does, the better WWF uses him. Everybody else's price goes up. The wrestlers make more money. The whole business is in better shape when the wrestlers make more money. I'm all for all of that.
Yeah. No, I think we could all. I would say that a bidding war is not a positive for AEW, but it's a positive for the industry and for the talent.
Yes.
Because WWE,
Yes.
they release like 450 people. Those P&Ls, when they do it this quarter, there's going to be a huge opening compared to previous years, with their budget. So I think it's a positive, man. I think anybody that does this for a living, to say that they're making millions of dollars from wrestling, I think that's a tremendous thing.
All right. I think that'll do it. Good show. Had Jon Alba on. We finally got to talk to him. Went through all the WrestleMania stuff. Even snuck in a little AEW MJF talk. So I think we'll end it here. Now, I'll go first because I just want to quickly mention the things that are going on my website, Fight Game Media, and in our network, our podcast network. So we have so many shows happening this week, so many shows for our free podcast network and so many shows for our Patreon. We are covering as much as humanly possible that we can cover on WrestleMania. I sent we have a little graphic here. So
Wow.
as you can see, and I'm producing every single one of these shows, by the way. So I'm going to be a very busy person. We've already made it through the first 4, but starting Friday, and we'll see. Maybe we can get an Andrew Zarian on one of these things. We'll see. We're working on it. There's some deals going on behind the scenes. But my live YouTube show, Brews News, on Friday at noon. And then we're going to do a Twitter Spaces with like the entire Fight Game Media crew on the Fight Game Media Twitter. Then we have all these bonus shows based on the shows. And then after WrestleMania, we have a Fight Game Media Network, which is our free feed recap. And then we have the Patreon and YouTube recap. So just tons of stuff. We have the Power Bombshells, which is our new YouTube-only show. So I just wanted to mention, if you are a fan of the Fight Game Media stuff, you will probably be pretty happy with what we're doing this week. So definitely just check it out. And just at Fight Game Media on Twitter. All the stuff will be posted there as we're getting ready to do it and everything. And there's, lots of stuff going on. So that's what I'm doing. In addition, coming back with Big Dave Meltzer on Friday to do Wrestling Observer Radio after the ROH pay-per-view. And then tomorrow night with John LaRocca, we'll do a little bit of WrestleMania stuff, but mostly focusing on NXT and AEW Dynamite. So what about you, Andrew? What have you got going on?
Let's see. I got Matt Men on Thursday. We're going to do a nice little recap of Dynamite and everything else going on. Friday, I am not doing anything. Friday, I won't be live. But Saturday, I'll be live, I believe, with a watch-along for NXT. I'm going to be doing a watch-along Saturday.
You are doing a watch-along.
I'm doing it in the afternoon. I'm going to do that, and then I'm planning on doing something a little different on Saturday for WrestleMania. I think what I'm going to do, I'm going to set up the cameras in my living room. And I'm going to zhuzh up my living room with lights and everything. And then you're going to watch me get drunk and eat pizza while I watch the pay-per-view. So if anybody's interested in that, all right, you can join me. I may not do a watch-along. I don't know. I may just hang out. I dread them at this point. But I'm going to do that 1 o'clock NXT watch-along. It's easy. It's in the afternoon. Sunday, Observer Live, 2-hour edition of Observer Live. Well, we'll talk about everything happening in pro wrestling and then do a recap show of a preview to WrestleMania Night 2 and everything that happened Night 1. I have to figure out how I'm doing my guests that day because everybody is obviously busy. So I'll figure it out. I got stuff going on. And then, we're over it. It's done. And then we'll talk about, everything else going on.
Yeah, crazy week. Super excited about it. And our good pal, we're going to have to get her back on pretty soon. Our former co-host. Wow, Denise's schedule is nuts. So she'll be
80 shows.
super busy too. Yeah. Tons. All right.
Yeah.
That is it from here. Thanks for hanging out with us for a little, we usually try to keep it nice and tight at that hour, but with Jon on, we had a couple more things we wanted to talk about. So thank you to everybody for watching and listening to the podcast version. For Jon Alba, for Andrew Zarian, I am Double G. We will see you when we see you. Peace out.